Good morning, everybody. It's about 9:30 in the morning, and I wanted to stick to what I was saying on the Happy Pups Training Instagram. If you're not following that, please do. It's just Happy Pups Training on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. But yesterday I was asked what I thought was a very important question, and it was, what's the difference between training and rehabbing aggressive dogs? This was asked me by a member of kennel staff for the Pooch Hotel, which is an excellent hotel in West LA if you're ever in the area and need to board your dog somewhere. One of the staff there, she had done training in the past. I believe she had told me that she had done some strictly positive reinforcement stuff as well as some balanced training stuff, which means, prong collars, and I don't know if she's ever done e-collar, but e-collar's included in that. Balanced training just means that you praise good behaviors, but you also punish or correct negative behavior, and that's why they call it balance. There's kind of an even approach. So I tried to give her a brief explanation, but I also told her that I'd give an explanation that is kind of merited by such a question that's long enough, hopefully, on the podcast, so this is my attempt of doing so. So I made a little list here, bear with me for a second. I'm going to start with all of the ways in which they're similar, and then we'll jump into the ways that they're different, and then I'll try to recap it and see if I can't create as comprehensive an explanation here without using my hands and things as I can. Hopefully you guys understand this. And if not, shoot me an email, happypupstraining@gmail.com. Let me know if you have any questions on this or any other subject. I'll do my best to answer, or at least figure out the answer. And if you've got any ideas for topics or want to be on the show, same rules apply. happypupstraining@gmail.com. All right, let's jump into this. So, training versus aggression rehab. What is similar? What I find to be similar are many of the mechanics, and what I mean is a lot of the mundane kind of day-to-day stuff. If I were to take two totally untrained dogs, one were aggressive and one was not, then their training to someone who doesn't know much about dog training would look very similar. I'd work heel, sit, I'd work down, I'd work stay, place command. I'd work them if they were pushy, jumping in and out of the crate, if they were whiny in the crate. Leash work has to be on point. Spatial work has to be on point for the more aggressive dogs. If we're around a ton of dogs, sometimes I walk around with 3, 4, 5 dogs, and a few of them I've worked with before, but they used to be a little snappy toward dogs. So even though they've shown huge improvement, I still try to be careful. So I have them all with me, so they're relatively in proximity to each other, but I keep the leashes short enough that they could never get to each other if they ever wanted to, and I keep I keep the e-collars ready to go in case I need to correct one, because chances are, when you've got a group of rowdy dogs, if one gets rowdy, the other guys are not going to stay calm. So, obedience, in and of itself, very similar. Training obedience, I think, I would consider it absolutely vital. If I were to own any dog, I have 2, and if I were to ever get any more now or in the future, I would consider it a must to have them trained, whether they were aggressive or not. It's just so much easier to have dogs that understand what no means, understand their boundaries, and understand what you want them to do, what you don't want them to do. So obedience is going to happen anyway. Another thing that's very similar, whether a dog is aggressive or not, if you're talking about balanced training, is the correction and praise kind of dynamic. If a dog does something I like, I will praise it. If a dog does something I don't like, I will correct it. Or if the dog does something I don't like but doesn't know that I don't like it yet, then I won't correct it, but I will kind of guide it, make it do it again and again, and then get him to a point where I can praise it. I want people to keep in mind that you don't have to correct dogs very much. I know a lot of people have kind of a negative taste in their mouth when it comes to balance type training or like prong collar training, e-collar training, but what people don't understand is the thing that separates us from the dogs is how much smarter we are and how we can set up entire scenarios. Dogs pretty much can only react in the sense that we always have the upper hand in what's going on. And what I mean is this. If I've got a dog that I ask to sit and he sits, I can praise that. Now, if I switch him out for the aggressive dog, remember I have 2, one's aggressive and one's not. I bring him upstairs and I ask him to sit, and he sits until he hears my other dogs in the kennels, and he freaks out and he gets up. I can correct him for getting up, but I can still create a situation where I can praise him. I'll correct him for getting up, I'll put him back in his sit. Now, I wouldn't praise that because I had to put him back. However, I can move him around a little bit, heel him out of the room, back into the room, ask him to sit again. This time he'll sit on his own, and that's praiseworthy. And I can do it again and again and again and praise him again and again and again. You can make training as positive as you decide to make it. which should be as positive as humanly possible. Otherwise, I consider that a failure on the trainer. So keep in mind that corrections and praise, in and of themselves, they're going to be the same, whether it be an aggressive dog or not. But when we get into the differences, you're going to notice that there's some differences in kind of reasoning, and there's a few differences in what we correct for in aggressive dogs. Now, the other thing is rules and boundaries. So it could, I guess, go in line with corrections, but I think that from what I've heard from other dog trainers, the difference here is definitely worth digging into so that people really understand. It's important that dogs have their rules and their structure because dogs were bred to want rules and structure. I've never met a dog that hated training, even if the actual training process was difficult, like for an aggressive dog. I've never met a dog that finished training and was worse off because of it. They're always happier, and because they behave better, they always get, they always enjoy more freedoms because they're well behaved now, which means they're even happier. And it's just, kind of exponential goodness. But your dogs can only be as free as they are under control. And what I mean is, I keep my 2 dogs off leash when I've got other dogs with me, only because I trust them enough that if I set a boundary, you go away, you lay down, you stay, leave the dog alone, etc., they will obey it. If I wasn't confident in my dogs to that degree, and I do mean to like a fail-proof degree, then I absolutely would not keep them around the other dogs off leash like that, just because it's a risk and it's a failure on me to risk anything when there's already enough risk just kind of inherent with what we're doing, aggressive animals. If that were the case, I would keep my dogs either on leash or I would just take them out in groups of like 2 and keep everyone separate, which I often do, but I will get into that in the differences. A little side note, even if you've got a dog that you completely trust 1,000% of the time, I still keep the e-collars on my dogs every time we go out, only because it's better to be safe than sorry. So to recap what's similar, the obedience is the same. The kind of mundane, hammering in commands, heel sit, down stay, praising everything, that's all the same. Correcting bad behaviors, that's going to be the same. And boundaries and rules, that's all going to be the same. And when I say the same, I mean whether your dog is friendly or not, he should or she should have all of these understandings in place. The dog should know the commands. The dog should understand that they'll be praised for good behavior. And the dog should understand that there are boundaries and things that you don't do. Now let's jump into what's different. What I find to be different is, if we're talking about boundaries, there's sort of a different mindset that people need to take on when they enforce boundaries. When you've got dogs that are pushy with people or dogs or whatever the case may be, you'll find that when you push the dog back, the dog may get a little growly or standoffish with the trainer. For example, I was working with a dog yesterday. He and his brother are growly with each other. I put the e-collar on him, and I corrected him, and then he tried to growl at me because he didn't like the fact that I was correcting him. Now, that's definitely the dog being rubbed the wrong way because he's so used to getting his own way. That's fine in the sense that I'm gonna work that more. I need him to understand that what I say goes, period, and there is no tolerance for growly, mouthy, lungy behavior. Not because I want to be, unnecessarily firm with him, but because once I can get this dog to understand that it's, me who sets the rules and it's me who does these things, then I can get him into a headspace where he doesn't believe that it's his duty to do these things. If somebody walks into his house, he runs over, bark, bark, bark. If somebody walks into my house and they stare, I tell them leave it, and then they, disengage. It's not your job to mess with anything. So it's not a matter of, it's not like a macho kind of push the dog back type thing, so much as it is teach the dog that it's honestly for your own good to stop trying to engage every dog or person that you dislike for whatever reason. So the mindset for corrections and boundaries, they need to be that of the dog that has aggressive tendencies or like reactive, a bitey history. It's not for no reason. Dogs are not killers by nature. Dogs don't just love biting things, at least not in an aggressive sense. They love chewing things, but they do it because it makes sense to them at the time, considering what they know. So if I have a dog that I take on and I've had him for like a day, I bring him home, he has no idea who I am, what I intend to do, So in a sense, it's smart of him to try to push his space, to try to keep me at a distance. And what better way for a dog to do that than to display his teeth and say, hey man, if you don't want to bite, you better stay away. I get it. I get where the dog is coming from, and that's why it's hard to be angry at them. They're just doing what they know how to do. Only problem is they don't know enough. So when you are pushing boundaries, keep in mind that the dog is just doing what the dog thinks he needs to do. So I don't want anyone to come from the position of oh, how dare this dog growl at me? I'm going to show him. So much as I want them to come from the position of, look, man, I get it. You're nervous, but this is not the way to handle nervous. Growling is no longer effective. Growling is no longer going to serve you in life. I need you to understand that the sooner you go along, then the sooner you're going to love me, love training, and the sooner you're going to go home, and the better your life is going to be. So never be upset with the dog. I'm not saying talk to the dog either, of course, but I just mean that's something that I kind of keep in my head. Don't be angry with the dog. Just correct him because it's for his own good, not because it's easy to want to correct the dog, if they're snappy. I believe that if someone has that sort of temperament, you probably shouldn't even be training, or at least kind of check yourself. We used to have this saying, kennels I used to work for, where if you're having a bad day or whatever else, you're not allowed to touch the dogs. Manners is another thing too. Manners, I guess I kind of teach with obedience, but I tend to only work with aggressive dogs, so I do it every time. Is manners and obedience, there's a difference there. And I think that the more pushy, not even necessarily aggressive, but the more pushy, the more bratty, the more impulsive, the less likely to listen the dog, especially with aggressive dogs, because they don't listen. If a dog's fighting and you tell them no stop, no stop, no stop, they're not going to stop. But the more pushy the dog, the more important I think it is to set firm manners. And the manners, the way I was taught, are this. Manner number 1 is you don't jump. Manner number 2 is you don't bite or nip, play bite. Manner number 3 is you always come when I call you. Manner number 4 is you never leave my side without my permission. And that includes, squirrels, cats, strangers in the house. Manner number 5 is you never ever put tension on my leash. So the purpose of these manners is not so much mechanical. It's not, my dog won't leave my side. How impressive is that? It's to keep the dog in the understanding of you need to constantly listen and be aware. Think of it like driving. There have been so many accidents where people aren't even necessarily on their phone. They're just kind of zoned out, staring at the road, but just kind of zoned out. And then next thing you know, bang, you hit somebody from behind. It's one of those things where you need to pay constant attention. Much like, having a newborn baby in the house, you need to be listening if the baby's whining, if the baby woke up, or whatever else. The dogs, I want them to always have in their little heads, if we're out and they're having like the time of their lives, hiking, chasing after squirrels and birds or whatever else, I want them to always have a little sprinkling of am I listening for Mariano in their heads. And what I mean is, because my dogs are good enough off leash, I let them be off leash, and because they are good enough with their heel that they won't break it for like a jackrabbit or a bird or something in the distance, every now and then I'll let my dog run after a bird. I won't let her get to it, of course, but she just runs in that direction. I'll tell her go get it. She flies over there, has a good old time. But without use of the e-collar, I tell her, I recall her, Mia, come, and she comes back. And that's because she's listening to what I'm saying. Another great way to work the dogs to listen to what you say, if you have several dogs or are working more than one dog at a time, I work them together but independently. And what I mean is I have 2 dogs out. Both dogs are with me, but I'll have one heel and one lay down and stay. And then I'll put the other one down and have him stay while I recall the one that was behind him because he stayed while the other one healed. And I work them, kind of independently, like in tandem like that. That is to work their impulsiveness as well as their ability to kind of decipher and listen for their own name and decide for themselves, did he say my name? Did he say this name? Another fun thing that I do to work impulsiveness is I'll put one in a stay, and then I'll do things that may be like inviting, like sit down on the floor, and still ask them to stay. But normally when you get down, like to your knee, like to tie your shoe, the dog's going to want to run and play with you. As simple or as nonsensical as these things may seem, because I can understand where somebody, could be listening to this and say, what does it have to do with aggression? The idea is impulse control. The more control you can teach your dog to have over their own impulses, the less likely they are to try to take off after another dog, because they understand that I said no. And if you try, it's not going to work. You're just going to get corrected.